Welcome. The BCheque Chats is back for another episode after a long hiatus. I'm back with Luke today from the First Mint. The BCheque Chats.
What's up?
The BCheque Chats talks to the finest builders, creators, traders, and thinkers in the Web3 space. And Luke is the founder of the First Mint, a Web3 sports community, which I believe houses some genuinely passionate people about sport. And that's why I really like what you're doing, Luke, because anything when people are doing it genuinely out of some kind of authentic love of whatever, it doesn't matter whether it's sport, music, art, like I really don't care. But the fact that you seem to have attracted genuinely passionate people about sport, and you can feel that passion in your media, I just love that. So thanks for your time. Look forward to diving in with you. What's the secret? Where did this love come from?
You know what? I mean, thank you for the wonderful intro. And it's funny you're using my real name, but in the streets of NFTs, I go by LG, which is also my real name, because my middle name is George, which is a name that I
should have checked that with you first. To be fair.
No. Everybody, and you can call me either one. I have no preference. I didn't intend for people to ever call me LG, but it started as that when I started a podcast, I always felt that if you had like a radio show or you're an author, that you should use your first two initials, right? Like some of my favorite authors, like C.S. Lewis or something like that, right? And I'm like, I'll be that for my podcast name, which is what, my podcast is something that 3 people will listen to. And then it got a little bit more popular than that. So now anywhere I go, people are like, if I go to, NFT NYC or something like that, people are like, LG, and I'm like, yes, that's who I am now. So it's actually nice. It's actually nice to be checked to be referred to as Luke, because that's my actual name. So that's much better.
It's an absolute minefield, isn't it? Like, it's very difficult to interact with people, particularly if you're undoxed, trying to figure out when you do finally meet people in the physical realm, like how to introduce yourself. Like, was there any point where you were undoxed, or did you deal with that issue straight away? Because I was just at NFT Paris, and I had a whole conversation with someone, and at the end I did introduce myself as my name, because I feel like that's the most appropriate thing to do in real life. And then I said who I was on Twitter after, and they're like, oh cool, like I've been reading your stuff for ages or whatever. How did you navigate that at the beginning?
Good question. I mean, when I started the First Mint, which is the podcast and everything, I wanted to be me. So I didn't, I was fine with being doxxed. Like, actually the LG Doucet had been my screen name on Twitter and on Instagram for a long time. So I'd always used that. So I went with it when I started a podcast. So I was always okay being me. And but prior to that, actually, because I'd been in NFTs and kind of Web3 for a good portion of 2020, like crypto was pretty much like my pandemic reaction, right? Where it's like everybody was bored, nothing to do, and like all other markets, crypto crashed, and so I was like, this seems like a good opportunity. ETH is like $99 today. Like, maybe I'll buy a little bit, and that kind of was my rabbit hole moment, which is almost exactly a year ago today. But what originally, when I started kind of perusing the streets, let's say, of Web3, I wanted to be anonymous because I noticed that everybody else had like some kind of like funny name, right? Like, nobody was just their name. And back then, it's funny is that most people, their profile photos or PFPs were something kind of random, but very rarely were they actually NFTs, right? People wanted to be undoxed, but they didn't, like, there were no PFPs. There was just like a few people had punks, and those were like signaled like you were some kind of weird believer in like Ethereum or whatever. And then there were Avastars, which had kind of tried to copy punks a little bit and make it more accessible. So those are the two things. But otherwise, like, some people had either one, but then everybody just had something totally random. So what I went with in the very early days when I got Discord for the first time is I went with Zion Williamson, who's a player in the NBA. And I was just like, I'm just going to be Zion Williamson. And then like very close to when the First Mint started, when I was like, you know what, I want to put my name out there, I want to start making content, I switched to LG Doucet to be me, and actually made my profile photo. We've actually never spoken in Discord. My PFP in Discord is different than what it is on Twitter. I made my PFP this close-up photo of my mouth from a photo of me where I have this like crazy mustache. Like a couple years ago, I used to be a runner, and I ran with like a huge mustache. So my Discord PFP is just this like close up just around my mouth. But what I decided to do is I wanted it to be like really notable when I showed up in a Discord. So now when I show up in a Discord, it's like, it's just this like face, this like mustache mouth, but it's my name. So I don't know. That kind of answers your question, is that I thought about it for a while. At first I wanted to be super anonymous, just use a basketball player's name. But then when I wanted to make it a bit more of a serious go, I decided to be me.
That makes sense. I do want to come back to this idea, because I want to approach this interview in two ways. One, kind of the learnings and thoughts and experiences of being a founder. So I do want to attack that a bit more, because I think so many people think that being anonymous is the default position in the space. And I've actually done a 360 on that recently, thinking like, I don't know, I'm not quite sure about that. But let's go back a little bit first before we get into that, because you mentioned when you first got into NFTs, kind of a pandemic style thing. How did that first happen? And then what inspired the first mint?
For sure. So I've been working in like the digital content space since 2009. Like I was one of the very early people to social media in terms of working with brands. So since way back then, like I'm from the era where I used to fly around to different boardrooms in North America and explain to people like what a Facebook page was, right? So like to like huge brands, and they were like, didn't understand, but they're like, you're this young person who gets it, so please explain it to us. And it was like the kind of thing where like half the people in the room would be like, I don't know what you mean. You know, they would not understand, which is crazy to think now. But listen, like in 2009, like this like Facebook was a fringe thing that college kids used. And it's something that like very few other people had. And Twitter was brand new. Instagram didn't exist. So that was like a time kind of like now where, you know, if you, like I used to do, I would tell people what I did for work, and I was like, I'm a social media specialist, and people would be like, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, right? And that you could probably see parallels with that now, where it's like, if I walked around now and I was like, I'm an NFT expert, people were like, that is so stupid. Not just in the real world, but also in the NFT world. If I was in the NFT world and I'm like, hey, BCheque, I'm an NFT expert, you'd be like, yeah, right. You know, I've read your stuff. You're not, right? But you know what I mean? It's kind of like this. It was a funny time. So I had this career for a long time in social media, and saw social media go from, hey, like it's stupid, I don't understand it, to it's super standardized. Brands are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars buying ads. Facebook is a $100 billion business, etc. So I worked in that space for a long time, and right up until the pandemic, my last gig was I was running a commercial film studio in Vancouver, Canada, where we were filming, I don't know, like truck commercials and, you know, yoga pant videos and that kind of stuff, and having a lot of fun working with brands and kind of just creating digital content. But when the pandemic hit, you know, as you may remember, everything shut down, all production shut down. So it was like the spring, I had no work, and I was kind of sitting around, and I had a few buddies who'd been working in the DeFi space for a long time who told me, they're like, listen, you should look into this stuff. We need content people in the space, because we're all a bunch of, you know, finance developer nerds, and we're never going to be able to explain this stuff to other people. Like it's very siloed for them. They're like, we're doing, you know, DeFi summer and everything, but like everybody on the outside doesn't understand. And honestly, as soon as I looked at DeFi, it took me a long time to wrap my head around it, but as soon as I understood it, I was like, there's no way normal people ever understand this, because most people don't even understand how their own investments work, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like most people can't even explain to you like really how different mortgage rates, right? Yeah. So it's something
I think on top of that, like it's not just that they don't understand. Most people don't want to understand. Like they just want these things to work in the background, right? Like no one wants to know the mechanics of how the bank works and where they move the money. They just want when they tap their phone or their card and thing, they want their money to go, and they want the money to be safe. But you know, the mechanics of it, people aren't interested in.
No, and it's funny. It was such a strange relationship with money that way, right? Where it's like it's so important, and yet we're so unwilling to understand, right? Like taxes, we all think our taxes are so complicated, and yet, you know, we've never actually taken time personally to actually understand the tax laws of our own country and why they are a certain way. And yet we vote every election too, right? So there's a lot of little funny things about, hopefully long-term crypto can add a lot more self-sovereignty to people and their finances, which is kind of, you know, one of the larger goals of Bitcoin and all that. But listen, summer 2020, it's a pandemic. People are looking for any kind of outlet. I find DeFi and I'm like, no, there's no way. I'm not doing it. I'm not working in DeFi. Like, I don't want to do this. But then I found a product called NBA TopShot, which this is like end of the summer 2020. I don't know if you follow the NBA at all, but the NBA was one of the first leagues to restart playing, where what they did is to finish their season, they had the bubble in Florida where they all lived on this campus for a couple months, and that's when, you know, the Lakers won. And they had maybe a couple hundred users, right? And I found that product and I was like, wow, like, and I learned what an NFT was. And I realized immediately, I was like, well, there's already a huge brand here. You know, like the NBA is like, NBA franchises are worth like $2-3 billion each. So there's $100 billion league, right? So as soon as I found that, I was like, this is what it is. Like, this is how brands will enter. Crypto is through something called an NFT, which now, you know, now is so obvious, but this is 3 years ago where like nobody has heard of this. Like I at the time, like literally BCheque, I had nobody to talk to about it. Right, because there's nobody in my brand content circles who even understood Bitcoin or anything related to crypto. Even the DeFi guys I knew were like, "Oh yeah, those NFT things, that sounds interesting." Like, I remember CryptoKitties from 3 years ago. Like, they didn't, like, nobody was really looking at this. But I found that, and I found a few other products. You know, there's like the Sandbox was around back then. There's a few other kind of really interesting things. But I found TopShot and started collecting and started connecting with the community there. And again, for the first couple months, it was a couple of hundred people. And what's funny is in the TopShot Discord, we would actually talk about other NFTs. We talk about other drops that were happening. Like, hey, you're going to go get this. Here's, you know, we would like learn together because that's how small of a community it was. And then towards the end of that year, as the new NBA season started, which was around the holidays in 2020. So at the end of the year, TopShot started to percolate a little bit. You could feel like it was starting to catch a bit of traction. There's a lot more people coming in. So I decided to start a podcast about it called The First Mint. And here we are now.
Damn. So that at that point in time, what kind of supporting media existed? And when you started that, from a kind of founder's perspective, like, were you doing it like, well, this is just a bit of fun? Or were you doing it like, I see a genuine, legitimate opportunity here to create a whole media outlet for something that will live beyond TopShot? Because, you know, TopShot now certainly is not at its zenith. It kind of peaked and then it's still going and doing interesting things, but it's not where it was. But you still go on, you still talk about other stuff. So was that in your mind, or was it more like, I'm just going to do this for fun for a bit?
It's purely for fun. And I try, especially these days, to keep it fun and to make sure that I'm doing it for fun. It never started, you know, it's funny you asked that, because like a lot of people have asked me over, you know, especially at the start when we were very successful and TopShot was huge. Like, we had a lot of people want to invest in the First Mint. But a lot of people ask me, like, what is the grand vision of the First Mint? And honestly, this might be counterintuitive to a lot of other like founders you speak to, but it's like, I don't have one. Like, I didn't start with the First Mint with like, hey, we are going to be the blah, 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 you know, like that wasn't the point of it. I started as something fun that I thought that I would enjoy doing as a good like outlet, and that my friends in the community would enjoy, and it turned into something much bigger. But especially now in the bear market, and as everything's down, and you know, sports projects still do well. Like TopShot still does like $500,000 in volume every week, which is not nothing, right? It's still alive. There's still a community there, and a lot of the other sports projects, like SoRare, actually still have like a pretty big and thriving community, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not a dead area. It's just a bit in transition right now, let's say. But it's something that I've had to remind myself that it's like, this is something I wanted to do for fun, and it needs to be fun. And also as a creator, and you could probably relate to this, is that people want to listen to me, and they want to listen to me having fun as well, right? They don't like times that I've gotten too serious on the podcast or tried to do something like way more like super smart, complex, in-depth crypto. People don't really want that. They can't, like, my listeners came in, our audience came in, our community came in as this being like a fun place that no matter what's happening in the market, they can hear some relatable voices and we can have some fun. And I think it's been really important for me to keep it that. And that's kind of the guiding light for me, right? Is that anything I'm doing at the First Mint is like, am I having fun? Do I think this is great? And if the answer isn't yes to both of those, then I don't do it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The way it resonates with me is I often think about, sometimes I do think about what direction I'm going in, but then I look back at my archive and I kind of think, okay, well, I've written for 59 weeks in a row. Like, what have I done? What was my reason for writing back then? And it's always just been, I write what I want to see. Like, I write what I wish existed. And in some respects, one of the interesting things you mentioned earlier was, you said, you know, you were doing this thing, it was fun, but you had no one to talk to about it. So if you don't have anyone to talk to about it, well, you're going to have to build the community of people who you can interact with. And for me, it was like, well, when I came in, because I came in maybe a bit after you, so early 21, a bit after the TopShot craze, I caught kind of the back end of it. But I was just like, look, I need to learn about all this stuff. There's so much stuff to learn in the immediate thing, right? It's like, okay, cool, there's these NFTs, but what's the blockchain? Why is that there? Then there's cryptocurrency. There's all of these things that are interrelated in this world that you need to try to get your head around in order to have a reasonable understanding of the mechanics of any of it. So I was like, well, I'm just going to write what I wish I could, like, write what I need to learn, basically. And that's how it started. So I think it's definitely a founding principle to just be like, look, just do what you want to see, because this space is so new. Yeah. Basically, you can do whatever you want.
Well, and BCheque, it's also, one of the things I find is really funny in our space right now, especially, is that you have a lot of people giving advice in terms of how to grow yourself in Web3. And one of the recurring pieces of advice is to become a content creator, write some tweets, start a newsletter, start streaming or whatever. And people always position that as, hey, this is a good way to go and get a following so that, you can get a job, or that you can just, get into more communities. But for me, that is not, those are good advantages, sure, of being a content creator, but it completely misses the point of how transformative creating content can be, right? And even like you're saying, it's like you wanted to go learn about this stuff and you couldn't find the right resource for it, so you just went and did it on your own, right? And I think it's that kind of passion and that like drive to go and make content that is for you first and foremost. That is the absolute advantage of being a content creator. It doesn't matter if 5 people listen to it or 5 million people listen to it. Being like true to what you want to see, going out there and making something that you really want, and really exploring that as a creator and artist. You're not really, I don't know if writing content counts as being an artist, but writing is definitely a form of art. So maybe, but I think that is something that most people don't realize, that creating content, again, regardless of audience, is so vital for them, is so vital for the experience. So it's something, I'm very glad that you got into the space and started doing that, because I think it's like, that's just made you a better crypto person overall, whether you're a trader or an investor or just a participant.
Yeah. I'm way more knowledgeable after writing something. Like, one thing that people always used to say, like, before I was a lawyer, I was a teacher, and people would always say that you don't really know anything until you have to teach it, because sometimes knowledge kind of exists in you somewhere and you've got a feeling for it, but if you ever have to explain it to someone, you just get found out if you don't really know it. So it definitely solidifies your understanding. I want to ask about this this idea of like content creation as an art, because I completely agree with you. Loads of people advise other people, like, oh, just write a blog, just do a podcast, do whatever. Yeah. And I think that does miss like some of the skill and some of the art. So I'm completely pro people starting and having a go and being bad at the beginning and then getting better over time. But to what extent do you think like this stuff isn't art and some people are more naturally good at it? And how have you got better, do you think?
Listen, everything is, I always use an analogy of going to the gym and working out. And whether that applies to writing or it applies to mental health or a lot of other things that people want to get better at in their lives, everything to me, like most of those things to me, are a muscle, right? And sure, you can wish you're one of the very few people who just woke up, who just became a person. You were born and you had the greatest singing voice or whatever that is. But very few people that are successful are that. Maybe basketball players because they grew to be 7 feet tall. Good for them. But hey, you know what? There are a lot of 7 foot tall people that are not in the NBA. There's still a lot of other people, right? So
are there those nut stories about like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, how like, you know, at various points in time, either as late as college, but certainly as early as high school, where it's like they're not on the team, they're not scoring, like they're not the people that they came to be, right?
Mm-hmm. To me, everything in terms of an applied skill, especially once you're an adult, is practice and understanding that, you know, again, use something like the gym. Like the first, like if you go to the gym and you're like, I want a bigger chest, and the first time you do a bench press, you can only do 20 pounds. To assume that you will only ever be able to lift 20 pounds is ridiculous. Anybody who's ever worked out can tell you that. But for some reason, when it comes to talented things, we think that if we don't nail it the first couple tries, that we'll never be able to do it. But to me, it is the exact same process. There's a fantastic book called The War of Art, not Art of War, War of Art. That is written by, I forget the guy's name, but he wrote The Legend of Bagger Vance. Anyways, that's his claim to fame. But he is, if you remember this amazing movie with Matt Damon and Will Smith, that's about golf. Anyways, this guy, this book, The War of Art, is something that a friend recommended to me about 6 or 7 years ago, and it completely changed my perspective as a person who worked in content, where he describes content creation as honestly like something that everything in the world would try to stop you from doing it. Like there are many, many hundreds of reasons that will stop you from sitting down at your desk and just starting to write. There's a million: procrastination, a million, love, everything will try and stop you. And what he basically, everything, there's a million reasons, there's 1,000 reasons to that you will come up with to stop yourself from sitting down and just writing the first couple of words. And once you've written those first couple of words, there's 1,000 more reasons that'll try and convince you to not write again. But if you create a habit, if you start writing every day, and again, just writing as an example, then eventually it's something that you workshop and that you turn into part of your life. And like a good muscle, if you don't use it, you do lose it. But the more you work out, the stronger you get. So that's how I see content creation. And that's what motivates me to, you know, no matter what, even if I'm not feeling it, is to sit down every week, record the podcast, write a couple of newsletters, and just get it out there. Yeah,
I completely second that. Like, I remember like the first pieces I did the first newsletter I ever wrote took 10 days to write.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's not sustainable, is it? Like,
no,
I can't do that. But I mean, that's just how long it took when you're riddled by all of those things you suggest: insecurity, not certain about the quality, want to make sure it's right, all of those things. So yeah, it's a difficult process.
Any good artist, BCheque, doesn't matter if they're a writer, visual artist, or whatever, will tell you that, you know, you'll watch them make something, write something, paint something, sing something, whatever that is, whatever it is that they do, play a sport incredibly well, whatever that excellence is. And they'll do it it'll seem so easy for them. And the first thing they'll tell you is that, hey, you know, maybe creating this might have taken me just 10 minutes, but it took me 10 years to learn how to do it in 10 minutes. Right. Yeah. And your first time doing it will be so time consuming and so frustrating. And probably the first 100 times doing it will be the same way. But you have to trust that process, and patience is the key.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So what was the thing that you thought at the beginning you were not so good at? And and how did you improve?
What did I think I was not good at? Yeah, that's a really good question. I've never thought of that. Probably. Let me think on that for a second. I would say that still to this day, the part that I really struggle with every day is not knowing all the facts and feeling like my opinion doesn't matter. So my hurdle has always been mental and self-reflective, right? And it's something that even to this day, you know, we've done over 200 podcast episodes. We put out 3 newsletters every week, and however many tweets. There's still a huge part of me that thinks that, like, hey, you know what? Like what you're writing is stupid. and other people are way smarter at this than you are, and what you're writing doesn't matter. That's easily been the biggest hurdle. That's not necessarily like what I didn't think I was good at. Of course, part of me, I'm like, yes, this writing is good. Like I like what I make, but I would say that the confidence in it is not always there. You know, so I think I like the quality of it. I really enjoy doing what I do and writing what I do. But the part that I could improve back then and I can improve now is fully believing it.
That makes a lot of sense. How was this journey then from starting First Mint? So we kind of got up to there in the chronology, and then obviously TopShot started. You started producing the content. Mm-hmm. How did it feel? You know, building this whole community from the ground up. Who was working with you? What kind of decisions were you making? And how did that journey go?
Man, it's a very different journey than everybody else. I actually envy where you're at, BCheque, because you are on this, kind of long, slow, but eventually incredibly steep path to success. You know what I mean? It's like, even, you're posting every week, be like, hey, I have this many new subscribers, and you're starting to see that momentum catch on.
Yeah.
And that's a very normal path for people who are really good at what they do and that are going to be really successful. Our success was overnight, which was incredibly overwhelming, because basically, TopShot was starting to catch some fire there at the start of 2021. And like going from, 500 weekly buyers, 600, 700, 1200, 1500, right, was starting to catch on. And that's just before that is when I started the First Mint as something to, I honestly had a few friends looking to get into it. And I was like, cool, I'll just make a podcast where, I'll talk to some of the other collectors. It'll be a fun little thing. Yeah. And 2 months later, we were number 3 on the iTunes basketball chart in like every single freaking country, because that's the category I had put the podcast in. And TopShot was so insanely popular, and there were no other community resources. Like, there was even TopShot didn't have, like, barely even had a blog, because they didn't have the resources. Like, they just hired people,
they just started, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, they didn't have all that, right? So there's very few places for people to come and learn, and for there to be this regular resource. And what happened for the explosion of TopShot, maybe people don't know the story, is that, I started the show end of 2020, first week 2021, somewhere around then. And I think it was January 15th or 16th or something like that same year, a gentleman named Jonathan Bales wrote a blog post about how he and a group had purchased a John Morant NFT on TopShot for $35,000. And that kind of broke the fantasy sports internet, because Jonathan Bale is a very popular guy. Like, a lot of people follow him. He's started a few companies, including he's one of the founders of Lucky Trader, if you know who they are, big in the NFT content space as well. But he had come from the fantasy sports world, having founded a company called Fantasy Labs that they had sold to Action Network a couple years prior. So he was kind of this fantasy sports guru, and he wrote about this. He wrote to his huge mailing list this big article about why TopShot was the future and why NFTs were the future. And overnight, the entire fantasy sports world of North America came bombarding into TopShot, being like, holy shit, it's the stock market of NBA players. Oh my God, where do I learn about this? And there was nothing else but my show. And then, like, quickly, a lot of other shows popped up, because a lot of people in that community, really talented creators there as well, were like, we should cover this. We should make our own show, make our own platform. So there's a lot of, the ecosystem grew really quickly. But at the end of the day, even TopShot would feature my content at the time, which was very fortunate, very, very grateful for them. They featured some of the videos I made. They featured me as a creator, and were like, hey, you want to learn more about TopShot? Go listen to this guy. So I was very lucky to be in that position. And yeah, by the end of February, we were in the top 5 on the charts, and up there with ESPN and The Athletic and like all other major sports publications, right? Which was super overwhelming. So a bit of a different path than most people, or this wasn't like years of labor and I finally my little publication has taken off. It was like, no, I started this at the exact right moment. And I was lucky too, BCheque. I have a background in broadcasting. So that's what I went to school for 20 years ago, and which was very why I worked in the content space. So in terms of setting up a microphone and editing and all that kind of stuff, I knew how to do all that, right? So I had a huge advantage. Again, I knew how to do all that because I'd done it for a long time. I didn't just know it, but it's something where it's like I had an advantage where it's like I knew how to craft a somewhat decent sounding show pretty quickly and how to write that. And again, fruits of my labor from all that. But in terms of the First Mint as a brand, we became very popular very quickly overnight, which was incredibly overwhelming because for a while there, like this was pre, like there had been no Beeple sale at the time. Right. Like the Beeple $69 million sale, that was in March. Like that was after all of this. Apes didn't mint until like May. Right. Like this was before any of that. So people were asking me like, what other NFT should I get? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what else there is. CryptoPunks, maybe they're $1,000 if you want to buy one. Right. Which is crazy to think. But I wasn't into that stuff. So yeah. So I don't know. It was a funny path, very different path to success, I think, than most people.
Did you have the kind of time and space in that whirlwind of kind of the skyrocketing upwards to enjoy that success, or was it like overwhelming?
We had a great time. What I did as another outlet is we started I was putting out 2 or 3 podcasts a week at that point. And we started, and this is like the middle of the pandemic, remember? So this is started 2021. So everybody's home. This is like the second wave from Christmas is killing everybody. So it's like, you're not allowed to go anywhere. There's no vaccine yet, right? So it's like everybody is hunkered down, and everybody in the US has just gotten their stimulus checks from Donald Trump, and they have $1,200 extra, and they're spending it on TopShot, and there's nothing to do, right? Like even all the sports games, like you watch the NBA footage from then, and they're playing in empty arenas, right? So there's nobody was doing anything. So it was a great time for NFTs to kind of come to. What I did as an outlet for fun is on Friday nights we would do a live show, a live stream, and I recruited my actual brother Phil to do the show with me, and we would feature different community members on the show, and kind of like people that are building platforms or just different collectors. Literally, like one couple brought their baby on the show once. They're like, "This is our baby. Like, we wanted you to meet her." It's like, okay, and they're like, "We're saving TopShot moments for her college fund." It's like, okay, like a little crazy. So we would do that on Friday nights for like 3 hours, and like hundreds of people would watch and just have fun with us. So we had a lot of fun. I didn't sleep much for a couple months there, but we had tons of fun.
That's so nice to know that when things go up so quickly that you can still enjoy the process. Whether things are down or whether things are up, like if you're not enjoying it, then it doesn't really make much sense. So that was during that time when things were going to the moon. What about the later period then? Because obviously TopShop in particular settled down a bit. The rest of the market sped up and went on turbo, and then everything kind of all the shit hit the fan. So
the end of 2021, right? August through to January 2022 was just the craziest time.
So how did you navigate that individually and as part of the First Mint?
Yeah, great question. So it was I had to make a decision at one point, right around May, when apes started taking off and people started getting really into it, because by that point TopShot had cooled off. People were already really mad at Dapper Labs for making bad decisions, and it's clear that people were looking at other avenues. And on my end, we had to make a decision of we have this tremendous community, but many of them don't have apes. They're a little hesitant to get into the Ethereum ecosystem because it's a scary place, right?
It is.
And people are starting to collect all this stuff. People are and then once apes minted, you had gutter cats, you had the bonsai trees, you had all this other stuff that started to come out, and it was clear that ecosystem was a little easier to build in, and that there was going to be a lot of stuff coming. So we kind of had to make a decision, be like, okay, do we stick to what we're doing, or do we pivot and cover all that stuff? And inevitably, we stuck to what we were doing because I didn't want to be unfair to our community, because I knew there's a lot of people who were, despite TopShot totally crumbling, that they wanted to stay there. So as a compromise, I guess, of those two kind of pulling forces, we hosted an event called First Mint Fest, which was kind of a 3-day educational festival online. free to attend, and sponsored by the big brands in the space. So we had Dapper Labs sponsor, we had Animoca brand sponsor, Labland, like a lot of other great partners sponsor and help us put together this festival, which was like, again, a 3-day. We did something that was super fun. We had what I called a pop-up Discord. So it was a Discord that only existed for 3 days, like a true conference or festival, right? Like you show up and then it's gone. Yeah. So, and I still have that Discord hidden away somewhere, but nobody can see it. Yeah. But and that was based on the belief that no matter what kind of NFTs you're collecting or what you're doing, that to me, Web3 is very much a collective experience. So let's create like a destination for everybody to come together and learn about this stuff. So that was kind of our compromise at first, was to, even if we weren't going to transition into the rest of the space too quickly, give our community the resources to do it if they wanted to. So that's, we distribute, obviously what a POAP is.
Yeah.
POAP. So back then, nobody knew what POAPs were. Like very few people had POAPs because very few people were using MetaMask. And we taught thousands of people during that festival how to set up a MetaMask and how to collect a POAP. And we distributed 16,000 POAPs over 3 days. So it was very much this point of like, let's get everybody else out the door. And while we kind of figure out what we're doing with content, inevitably, we did kind of stick to TopShot through all of 2021 and then use 2022 as a bit of a transition year to work with some new partners and talk a little broader in terms of the space. New sports projects were launching, right? You had the NFL from Dapper, UFC, Candy Digital, which was baseball, and later in the year, So Rare expanding to MLB and NBA. So 2022 is a year of kind of like broadening our scope content wise. And then towards the end of 2022, really kind of choosing sports as the focus, as the place where we, want to be the destination for it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting.
I don't know if it makes sense. I don't know if it makes any sense. It's hard, man. It's like, again, like I said, we didn't start the first bit with there was no like vision. Right. Yeah. So it's really, when you don't have a vision, obviously, if you have a vision, you should be open to changing it, because that's what a good entrepreneur does. It's be open to changing your mind. But without the vision and kind of with the mandate to just be like a fun destination for people, I don't think that there's really like a right or wrong decision to make. Right.
Yeah. Do you know what's difficult about it though? And one thing I think a lot of people will empathize with you about is that in this space, so many people tie either their content or literally their identity. They buy NFTs as profile pictures, which represent their identity online. And when they do that, it's like a binding commitment to this project. But then irrespective of what happens with that project, right? You're completely in those people's hands as to how they manage the project, how they manage the community, their financial decisions, their project decisions. And I think it's really interesting in this space where everyone seems to be, at least on the face of it, so pro decentralization and pro self-sovereignty, that people are literally giving their identities away to corporations. And then they're completely reliant on those corporations to make them either richer or make them more popular, because you kind of produce content either, if not on their behalf, then at least with them in mind. So I think loads and loads of people will empathize with you there, because it's like, well, as name whichever NFT project goes down in flames, that's like, some people have been working kind of in partnership with that community for loads of months, and it's like, well, what do you do now? The founder went and did something, completely ridiculous, and now you're like homeless on the internet. It feels weird when that happens.
Oh yeah, exactly. So, that's a great point, right? And I'm happy that I think what we ended up landing on was that we want to be kind of neutral when it comes to chains and projects and all that kind of stuff, and create something that is less so, hey, if less so based on the success of any particular asset or entity, and more so, based on the spirit of a community, right? And I think that ultimately, think in terms of thinking of like, what can the first mint be and what can I give back to the space? If we can create a place where people, can feel safe and feel happy regardless of what's happening to the assets that they hold, then I think that's a job well done for us as a community resource.
That has to be the way, right? Like, people have to want to hold these things. Like, you can't. The reason of being of NFTs, which actually I'm increasingly thinking with the blur farming and stuff, like, the reason of being is being just to be traded, and that can't necessarily, it just can't be the case.
Exactly.
For these things to really be successful. So you kind of broadened the scope and went, you mentioned a bunch of other kind of sports related projects.
Yeah.
What's exciting you most in the sports digital world at the moment?
In terms of what's currently available, very little.
Okay.
There's not, I don't think there's been a lot of innovation lately. And obviously, I think it's, innovation takes place behind closed doors, generally during bear markets. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this current phase. But what ended up happening in the sports world
what do you think the problem is right now, just to jump in?
Most projects just copied what TopShot was doing.
Got it.
Right? TopShot was like the hottest thing in the fucking universe when it came out. Like, you don't understand. Like, Shaq would talk about it on TV. He'd be like, let's TopShot that. It was so fucking huge. Like, people, like, just to give you a context, like, if you, up until January 2021, the project in NFTs that had done the most secondary volume all time was CryptoKitties with $30 million secondary volume total. Okay. That's how, think about $30 million of volume today in NFTs. This is not very much. Yuga's done $2 billion of volume or whatever with other assets. But back then, this is just 2 years ago, the most traded all-time collection was CryptoKitties at $30 million. And that was like, wow, we can't believe NFTs have been traded like CryptoPunks, nowhere near that.
Yeah.
Around this time, I think, or maybe like out of January or February 2021, TopShot broke that record. And that was a huge milestone because it was Dapper again. It was their, same company. And they're like, wow, we've hit a milestone. We've broken our own record of having a collection that's the most traded all time. And I remember it broke 30, and then it broke 40, and then it broke 50. And then a month later, this is after it had broken $50 million all time, it did $50 million in one day. And so that's just to give you a sense of how quickly TopShot went from, hey, wow, this is the biggest NFT collection ever, to doing that much volume in a single day. Right. So that did so many things for the space where, one, it showed that, holy shit, there's a lot of money here and a lot of people want to pay money for this stuff. But also it signaled that it's like, well, if TopShot, well, this kind of centralized chain on Flow, and that's very limited to like the NBA IP, if that can go and do 100, 200, $300 million of volume, what else can do that much, if not more? So that was so incredibly significant at the time. But also what it did, BCheque, is it signaled to the rest of the sports world that, hey, it's the pandemic right now. You don't have anybody in the arenas buying tickets, so you're down in revenue incredibly, and the future is uncertain. You don't know if you're going to need people to be vaccinated to go to the stadiums or what's going to happen. It's a very scary time, right? That first year of the pandemic. So all the sports leagues in the world were like, and this company is making money just selling the same videos that are available on YouTube. Are you crazy? Like, holy shit. So overnight, there was a huge scramble in the sports partnership world to get the licenses from every other league, right? So you had companies like Candy Digital that appeared overnight to just go and get like the baseball license, for example. So what ended up happening is that, although TopShot was and still is innovative, a lot of companies followed the exact same model. And even Dapper followed the exact same model when they launched NFL and UFC. And now, right, first of all, NFTs have taken a huge beating. We don't even know if what's currently in the industry can survive, as proven by industry trends where people are clearly looking for new things now, like fucking Bitcoin and who knows what else. But also in the sports world, first of all, sports are back. Right? Sports is back to making just as much money as it did before the pandemic, if not more. Sports is growing immensely, and people kind of followed the same thing, and it all crashed. Right? So it's you have all these projects now that created these video collectibles or whatever, and their future is very uncertain, very much like collecting physical cards. Because, physical cards have gone through many different iterations, also had a huge kind of blow up during the pandemic where people bought for obscene amounts, but that's very cyclical, right? So I think the difference between NFTs and sports cards is that sports cards are kind of constant. It'll always be kind of the same concept. But NFTs are a tech product. They're supposed to evolve. So right now, I think we're at a very funny transition point where TopShot blew up. Everybody copied what TopShot was. But now, in terms of tech, these are tech products, BCheque. A real tech product has millions of users, tens of millions of users, hundreds of millions of daily active users to be a good tech company. Do you know how many weekly buyers there are on TopShot? 5,000. It's nothing. So those products, these companies have a ton of money, and they need to evolve the experience and the product to become a big tech business like they are supposed to do, like their investors have been promised.
Yeah, two questions on that. One, what do you want to see in that respect, given you're so close to the sport stuff? And two, do you think we get a big, you see this tech evolve in a way where, we onboard loads and loads of people and can simultaneously keep exceptionally high prices?
Wait, what was your second question? Say that again.
The second question is there a way that many people get onboarded and assets stay at high prices? Because my thinking's always been the majority of people don't speculate on assets in general. Like the majority of people don't want wildly volatile assets in their life. If they want to buy a pack of sports stickers, or they want to buy a scarf from a football stadium when they go, they just want to buy it. Like they just want it. Right. They don't want it to buy it and then have it go up 10x the next day. So one of my pieces of thinking is like, well, all of these stuff is supposed to be worthless. Well, not literally worthless, but it's supposed to be worth $5, $10, and then you get loads of people coming in, but they buy it because they want it. They're not buying to sell it. If that makes sense.
BCheque, are you a sports fan? Football or anything like that? Yeah,
I'm a big football fan, but increasingly, my favorite sport now is American NFL.
Okay, great. Can you tell me some of the teams you support? I just need some context here.
So
as a sports fan.
I just follow Mahomes. Like I want Mahomes to win a lot. But
what about soccer? What about actual?
Oh, I'm a Man United fan and bought a ton of the Man United digital devils.
Oh yeah, on Tezos,
yeah,
great. Okay, so I think for true tech product adoption, you need a very basic emotional catalyst.
Yes,
right. Something like Facebook. And again, I'm not comparing sports NFTs to Facebook. Facebook's way bigger and will forever be way bigger. But something like Facebook, there had been a lot of other similar things like Facebook before. Facebook wasn't the first idea similar to Facebook. But where Facebook worked is that you could go online and decide who was available for you to date and see photos of them. Right. That's a very primal thing. It was this immediate online connection with photos and profile and availability. And that is what triggered so many people. Now Facebook is so many more things, man. You can go on Facebook and buy a boat if you want, like a billion other things. Like it turned into all this other shit. But the first thing that really got people onto there that I was like, that's the clicker, was this primal need. And I think sports is one of the few things in life that naturally and regularly taps deep into your emotional core, right? Absolutely. Like you're a Mahomes fan, so you just watched the Super Bowl. You watched a very dramatic Super Bowl that came right down to the wire, right? And that memory, wherever you were when you were watching that, and I'm assuming it was at like 5 a.m. for you.
Yeah, really late.
Yeah, but you will forever remember that moment when you won that title. And with Man U, back in their heyday, you'll always remember the feeling you had when certain players came to the team, scored their first goal, whatever that is, won the championship. You'll remember the loss. So I think that at the end of the day, there are some really, really, really deep emotional roots in sports. As you can see, like what other things in the world do people physically fight another group of people because they don't like the same team. You know what I mean? Like, you don't fight other
Yeah.
people because they don't like the same TV show as you, or they don't like
Yeah,
Pokemon.
yeah.
They like Harry Potter. They hate Star Wars. People don't fight over that, but people, especially in England, are gonna fucking go to the other town and kill each other, right? So there's a deep emotional catalyst of sports, and I don't think that NFTs and Web3 have yet captured that. They haven't tapped into that, and I think somebody's going to figure that out. I think a huge area of potential for that is something like tickets. Right. And proving your fandom. Like, there's nothing more valuable than emotionally. And again, not money, emotional value. Then, oh, you got to go to game 7 of this series. You got to go to the championship match and your team won or lost or whatever, but it was the most incredible feeling to be there, or even to watch it on TV. And again, you don't get a ticket from watching it on TV, but maybe you should. Right. I think that's something that we've lost track of in terms of having emotional value is a physical ticket, right? I remember being a kid and it's like your dad's going to take you to the match and he's like, here's the ticket for the match next week. And you're like, oh, this Willy Wonka, the golden ticket. Oh, like this most beautiful thing in the world. Now it's digital. It's super boring. But being digital also lays the groundwork for that, transitioning into Web3 for it being an NFT. Already now you go to a match and you scan your, ticket and you get in. So already that's very close to what we want it to be in NFTs. So I think that there's a really direct correlation there that somebody's going to figure out. Dapper Labs has a deal with Ticketmaster where they have been minting tickets on Flow. I've been digging for more information there, but they haven't really delivered anything. I think somebody could build like a world-class application on top of that ticket layer to actually bring all of that together and make these tickets NFTs. Would they be valuable financially? I don't know, but would they matter a lot to the individual? Absolutely. And I think that that's where there could be a huge catalyst yet again, maybe in the next bull run for the sports world and in NFTs. It's tickets.
Yeah, man. I think that definitely makes sense. And tapping into that innate fandom, as you say, sports is one of the no-brainers actually for digital assets, because as you say, the people feel so strongly about their affiliation. It's just perfect for organizations to tap into that and try to enhance the experience of these people who literally want to give you their money. They want to give you their money all the time so that they can prove to themselves, their family, their friends that they're on the team and that they're vocal supporters. So
that's it. Like, listen, let's say you take a trip to the US and you go see a Chiefs game next year, right? You show up and you go to the tailgate and you hang out with all these American people and you're like, I'm also a Mahomes fan. And they're like, okay, British guy, like, what do you know? Right? How do you prove that to them? Say, hey, I was stayed up till 5 a.m. watching the game. Like, you start coming, when you talk to other sports fans, you come up with all these reasons as to why you're like, I'm a bigger fan or I'm legit, right? Like, it's so important in sports is to connect with other fans or connect with fans from other teams, but just to prove, be like, no, I remember I was a kid and I was watching that moment happen. And yet you have no proof and you have no self-reflection, even just in your own surroundings, like on your walls or in your phone, that you did those things. And I think that that's what Web3 could be, is this kind of paper trail of all these moments you've experienced in sports and how important they were to you and really tracking that back, right? I think that that's what it could deliver. And again, like the groundwork is there, right? Like, it already exists. Ticketmaster delivers 500 million tickets a year to sporting events, to concerts. Like, this already exists. Like, there are already 500 million digital tickets given out every single year. So who's going to build the layer that brings that into something that you can actually track? What's the wallet going to be for that? How easy is that going to be to use? And which brands are going to tap into creating something really cool for their fans with that ticket? I think that to me is the ideal. And even with these NFTs, it's like, yeah, sure, it's nice to watch like a highlight of LeBron James doing a dunk, but it's going to be far more important to me to remember the game where I actually saw him play, even if he only scored 2 points. That's a way stronger memory than the most amazing dunk that he did. Yeah, it's great he had the dunk. That's great for like the whole league. But in terms of me individually as a fan, if I paid to see him once at an exhibition game and I got to see LeBron in the flesh, that is so much more powerful than the same replay of the same dunk over and over and over.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like proof of fandom / proof of memory in a way. Like that's what,
and it's
what
for yourself.
Really,
it's not for other people. It's not for other people. It's for you.
The value comes
it's
from
for
inside.
you.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think there's something very deep and visceral there that sports NFTs are on their way to, but haven't hit just yet.
Dude, I think that makes so much sense. I think that's a really, really nice point to kind of draw to a conclusion on. I can't wait to kind of navigate this sports environment, the digital sports environment through the First Mint. I'm always reading and keeping up with your stuff, so I'm really appreciative of that. Well, just a final question as we draw to a conclusion. I like to ask people what their biggest learning as a founder is in the space, and kind of, what's your biggest learning after going through this pretty nuts journey? Like, I'm so happy that we got to talk about that, because I didn't know loads of that stuff, but that's a wild journey, man. What's your biggest takeaway from it so far? And only not at the end of it by any stretch, but what are you thinking?
Somebody told me this very early on, because I had a lot of great people advise me early on in the process, people that I respected a lot, who gave me some of their time early on. And someone creating content, especially at the level that I was so many, TopShot was so wild, and so many people would DM me, and people would be mean to me. It was really hard to open yourself up to the comments of the internet. And, I'm a pretty fiery person. I can get pretty worked up, and very passionate. And obviously when you open yourself up to the internet and you get your first couple of mean comments, your natural inclination is to like literally find out where that person lives and go to their house and beat the shit out of them. Like, honestly, that's what you want to do. You're like, I'm going to kill this person, right? For saying that your podcast sucks. You're like, well, fuck you. You're just insane right away. But very early on, I had a friend tell me, someone who's now a friend, who's an advisor then, he told me that no matter what, reputation is everything in a space like this. And that your reputation is something that you get very few second chances with. And you're going to go through a lot of emotional highs and lows, and to always remember that, that people, however people describe you to other people is what you are in the space. And that really stuck with me. And that advice walked me off the ledge many, many, many times of, wanting to just lash out emotionally. And to really think about, still be very true to who I am and be very genuine and authentic, but to be really purposeful as well with the way I communicate with people and the way I give people some of my time, and also support others and whatever. So it's something that stuck with me, and I don't know if that's advice or whatever, but it's something that I've learned that it's like, that's true. It is very, very true. And you see now in Web3, right? Like you see like the Ryan Carsons, that kind of stuff, where it's like, fuck, man, like that guy's reputation will follow him anywhere. Right. And that obviously neither of us are on that level of profile. And I never want to be that famous. But even my reputation amongst my own community is vital and something that's very important to me. Right. And I think should be important to anybody else out there.
Absolutely, man. Reputation is everything. That's an awesome message to leave it on. LG, thanks a lot, man. This has been a great chat.
Thank you, dude. Absolutely.
Got to do it again. Take care, man.